He was a fun guy and he's super off the floor. A great guy to be around.
Extremely dominant in
Who's gonna guard this guy? Somebody's gotta guard this guy. That's all right. I guard this guy.
the Western Conference Finals and even getting to the finals.
From the GOAT of the sport to the most dominant player in league history, these are the NBA legends who've explained how good Charles Barkley was. Let's begin with Tyrone Corbin. Corbin was one of the best role players in the league in the late 80s and early 90s. But unfortunately for him, that meant having to face off against a prime Sir Charles on numerous occasions. Even though Chuck gave Tyrone a run for his money, the athlete has only had good things to say about him. According to Corbin, not only was the round mound of rebound a fantastic competitor, but he was a different kind of competitor. Why? Because he literally wanted to destroy everyone who stood in his way. Corbin then went on to add that there was literally nothing that Barkley couldn't do out on the floor. And that just goes to show how well-rounded he was. What's more, Corbin also pointed to the fact that Chuck had the ability to catch fire, go on a roll, and lead his team to a 10-0 run all by himself. But while Corbin was always up against Charles, the next guy who explained how deadly the athlete was had the privilege of playing alongside him. I'm talking about Cedric Ceballos. He and Chuck played together for Phoenix in the early 90s, and they were a fantastic pairing. Cedric and the Suns clearly enjoyed playing with Sir Charles because they knew they had a superstar on their team who could do it all for them. And to top it all off, he was also the type of guy who could sway the refs thanks to his physicality and aggressiveness. As Ceballos pointed out, that was pretty much unheard of in the Western Conference, minus Karl Malone. Though Cedric's praise didn't stop there. He pointed out how the Suns were missing that one piece in the puzzle that could carry them to the finals. And after they made it to the finals in 1993, it was clear as day that the Chuckster was that piece. He just brought a certain confidence with him that spread to the rest of the squad. Now, let's talk about one of his teammates from his days in Philly, the man himself, Hersey Hawkins. He was a beast when he played for the 76ers, and he complimented Chuck even better than Ceballos. When Hawk was asked to talk about his time with Barkley, he started off by saying that it was interesting, but then moved on to talk about how Sir Charles was one of those dudes who was just full of confidence. He knew he was a fantastic player, and he proved that to the NBA world on a nightly basis, according to Hersey. Now, let's move back to Sir Charles's opponents, because Greg Anthony had a lot of good things to say about him. Now, I'm sure most of you guys know Greg because he's been one of the commentators in NBA 2K games for years. But G-Money was another one of those role players from the 90s who doesn't get as much respect as he deserves. Greg and the round mound of rebound faced off 19 times during their playing careers. So I think it's safe to say that Anthony's opinions on the Chuck Wagon are pretty credible to say the least. Greg started by saying that Charles was different because even though he was undersized for his position, he was just able to do so much out on the floor. And it honestly just made no sense to most players, including G-Money. According to Anthony, even though Chuck didn't look the part, there just wasn't anyone who was as good as him at creating space and getting to their hotspots. And then he highlighted how, on top of all that, Barkley was a complete player because of his diverse skill set. Plus, he made sure to remind everyone of how fantastic Barkley's passing was, as not enough people give him credit for that. If you thought that was it for Greg's praises, then you'd be wrong. Because the former athlete also added that the Chuckster had that kill gene, which allowed him to go beast mode whenever it was crunch time. While Anthony was just a role player, star players have also sung praises for the Leaning Tower of Pizza, including the likes of Bernard King. He faced off against Sir Charles a total of 25 times, so much like Greg, he knows better than anyone else how lethal Chuck was in his prime. According to King, Barkley was generally a dominant player, but he was extremely dominant in the post. Bernard even went as far as to say that the round mound of rebound was one of the best and most talented players in the history of the league. Another former star who's had nothing but good things to say about Sir Charles is a man who faced off against him 7 times. I'm talking about Grant Hill. According to him, Barkley's one of the greatest power forwards in the history of the league. As said by Hill, he was dominant, physical, athletic, had a fantastic mentality, and was a joy to watch. Grant went on to say that even though he wasn't ever a 76ers fan before making it to the league, he knew that he was going to be treated to some of the most elite, explosive, and high-level basketball ever once the Chuckster was out on the court. He capped off his compliments by calling Sir Charles incredible and one of the best ever to play the game. I don't think anyone will disagree with those sentiments, not even the GOAT of the sport, the man, the myth, the legend, Michael Jordan. When MJ was being interviewed many years back, he was asked about how it was like playing against Barkley, and you guessed it, he only sang praises for him. His airness recalled the time he faced off against Barkley and the 76ers in the playoffs. MJ was on one of his signature hot streaks, and according to Jordan, Charles was super frustrated to say the least. He kept yelling at his squad to guard him before taking matters into his own hands and switching on to Mike. But Chuck was never known as a defensive stopper. Yet he still guarded MJ with some fantastic technique, which left Jordan really surprised. And the best part's that he was able to force his airness to pass the ball, so it was a successful mission for the Chuckster. MJ then went on to add that such moments were exactly what made Sir Charles so special. They showed how he was always up for the challenge, even if it meant having to do things that weren't his strong suit. Now, another player who's publicly talked about how phenomenal Barkley was as a player is one of Jordan's most bitter rivals. You guessed it, it's Isaiah Thomas. IT started by saying that he originally thought the 76ers made a huge mistake by drafting the round mound of rebound because he was overweight. But once Isaiah played against Charles, he realized that he was wrong to think that. According to Thomas, the Chuckster was literally doing it all out there. Whether it was grabbing boards, dribbling full court, or showing off his hops, you name it, he was doing it. Apparently, he was in disbelief after what he witnessed. He'd never seen someone that heavy move the way Chuck did. Now to finish things off, I'm going to talk about what one of Barkley's closest friends had to say about him. None other than Shaquille O'Neal. The round mound and the big diesel had their fair share of battles out on the court, so Shaq got to experience the greatness of the Chuckster firsthand. As stated by O'Neal, Sir Charles never cared if the guy in front of him was bigger, stronger, or faster. He was determined to bring the fight to them no matter what. Shaq even argued that no one could have stopped Prime Chuck. Why? Because of his tenacity, speed, and force, which made him one of the deadliest players of his time. If the most dominant player in NBA's history is saying that about you, you must have done something right. There you have it. Those were the NBA legends who've explained how great Charles was in his prime.